Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my introduction on the Outpost. I have two steps here. This is step 1 and this is step 2. And they are designed to fit into the square, which you're going to use to seed your outpost. Right. So step 1 is fairly simple, doesn't use too many materials. It's designed that you can basically build it with whatever you have in the train. Without taking up so much space that you can't take along a couple thousand rail and whatever other materials you need to get there. Right. Like anywhere, you have the remote to send loadouts back to the train and to dispatch trains, but you also have a couple extra switches here. So this one is designed specifically to turn this outpost on and off. This one is designed to either keep the train or allow the train to leave. So right now the train could approach the station and unload, but it would not be allowed to leave. And now it would be. Over here you have an inserter that lets that lets you control the loading and unloading inserters. So this one has 3 possible states. Phase 1. If you look close on the inserters, you can see the red and the green light. Phase 1 allows the train to be unloaded. Phase 2 is the opposite. You can load the train, and phase 3 freezes the inserters completely. Very useful if you're calling for a train that you don't want to be unloaded in this outpost. Maybe you're taking it somewhere else or something. All right. These 2 combinators you don't need to touch. They are just there that if you print the blueprint, this being toggled on means that the station is by default going to be active, which makes sense for the step 1, because that means that you want the train to come in, you want the train to be parked here and unloading, so that you can go and build the station up, right? Step 2. Whereas this one means decides whether or not on printing this blueprint the train go signal will be enabled or not, and I've disabled that by default. So these work in such a way that as you activate them, a rising edge detector notices that and will turn the corresponding toggle on or off. Okay. Otherwise, there's not much else to see here. You want to make sure that you have any bots, especially the logistics bots, in the top wagon, in the first wagon, because they get unloaded into this chest and fed into this roboport. So if you have any loadout, always make sure that your bots are in the first wagon, otherwise you will have to manually insert them. The second stop is quite a lot more complicated. You once again have your switches here. You have a new switch as well. This is the trash cycle. If you are done building your factory, your outpost, and you're going to move on to your next project, you simply turn this on. Let's pretend we have something in here that we want to return back to base. You turn this on. It forces the station to be on, and it forces the train go signal to be on. It also sends an empty loadout back to the station. You can, if I show you again, you can see here the red lamps. That means that anytime I activate the trash cycle, it automatically takes care of the trains for you, that they will be empty when they arrive here and can actually load all the materials in the station. Same story again with the combinators, just this time the other way around. When you first print, or when you, by not having this one activated, basically the station will, from the first step, will remain activated. And if you had the train go signal deactivated, it will be activated. The idea here is that in step 2, you're probably going to be building your stations. So you're going to order for multiple trains to come. Say you want to build 5 stations, you're probably going to use one of these loadouts here instead of the alpha loadout that I have. And you're just going to have set it to 5 or something, and you're just gonna send the trains one by one. So you actually want this to be enabled. The other purpose of having these inverted compared to up here, right, it's exactly the other way around, is that you can use this blueprint at a distance to turn stations on or off. It looks like, no, here. Do we need power? Where do we have power? Right. So you can see the station turned itself on. If I print step 2 over it, I have now also enabled the go signal, and I can then toggle them back and forth like this, right? Simply by printing the other one over it every time. You might have to shift click this because of the train, right? The train here might be in the way of just printing it over. And in this way you can basically toggle them back and forth across the map. Another option you could take as well is to just send the right A signal across the global network. You also have that option up here. So what happens if you send an A signal in across the global network? This combinator will compare A to a predefined value. I've left it at 1. So if you do not change this value ever, you can send basically 1 across the global network, and that would turn all your outposts on. Or you can go and give each outpost a unique value, and then maybe create like a map of constant combinator somewhere where you know if you turn this one on, this and this outpost will turn on, or whatever like that. And you can force the station to be on via the global network. Might be useful for some circuitry stuff. You have got a couple, okay, so sorry, back to the trash cycle. It forces the stations to be on, and once the trash cycle is done, whoops, that was one too many times, it automatically turns off the station and returns the inserter status back to normal. This is basically, if you're about to leave, the last thing you do, and you want to make sure that while you're already off doing whatever else you need to do, once the trash cycle is complete, you want to make sure that the station is automatically disabled. And that's what this inserter does for you. There is a display down here. So this one shows you how much free space you have in your station. The more items you add, the more of these lamps will turn off. And up here, if the final lamp is red, that actually means that you have no more space at all in the chests in the buffer. And if you turn on trash mode, this one will show you how many trains theoretically are needed to empty the station. This is not quite accurate, because if you look at this, the system does not know where exactly you have the items. It just knows that there are items in here, and it knows how many stacks of items you have. But if you imagine that you might have the entire load that would require 4 wagons only up here, that would mean that you would actually need 4 trains to come in, but it would only show you the 1 train, right? So you can't quite trust this, except when the station is completely full, of course. In that case, it's fairly obvious. The more items you have in here, the more likely it is that this display will be accurate. But if it doesn't show many trains, you don't know if it's actually going to take 4 trains or just 1, or maybe more trains than that. That's sadly an unfortunate side effect of not wanting to take up so much space here to track what's in every single chest and then use that in computation. I decided that this was doing well enough. Otherwise, I would have had to really bloat the station to make that work. Okay. Yep, that's it for the building side. On the maintenance side, we have a quite involved system. So I basically call what I did here an anemic version of LTN. It is nowhere near as good as LTN in vanilla, for example, but it works perfectly fine for the purpose. And it uses the train designated to work with this outpost as a local storage, you could say. And that's part of why it works in the first place. So you need to know that this train over here, I've put it in so skewed for a reason, and that is that you have to remember to put this one on active, and it has to park at the station for a moment, because what happens is that this station recognizes that it now has a train, and it saves that memory, that the ID of the train. If you mouse over the train, you can see it on the right. Train ID is 17,095. And that ID gets saved permanently in this memory cell over here, right? It can never be changed unless you actually break the memory like this, right? If you need to reset this for whatever reason, because maybe you messed up somehow and the wrong train got in here first, which really shouldn't happen, because there's a reason why I put this train right here. It completely blocks access. So no matter what, you should be able to make sure that the train that belongs to the station now, because you printed it at the same time, gets into the station. Right, so you basically go into automatic mode. It should go to the unload station, outpost maintenance unload. That's the station of this outpost. It populates the station with its ID. And when the train that belongs to this station is in here, it turns itself off. And that's important, because this means that I can use this blueprint without forcing you to every time give each station a unique name, or without having to change the schedule of the train ever. I can force the system to recognize that no other train should come here and serve the station. I'll show you how that works in practice. Over here, I've set up a little test bed. So over here we have step 1, right? Step 1 in use. It's basically how it looks. This is the depot. And this is step 2. This is the finished outpost seed. We activate this train. It moves up to its station and populates the station. And then it recognizes that the train is empty. It doesn't have what it wants. So the station sends it back to the depot. Let's actually speed up time a little bit. Now, there was something happened here that you didn't see because it wasn't on my screen, but the train came into the station and the station sent the ID of this train across the global network back to the outpost. And that triggered the outpost to send the loadout you set up here, to send it back to the depot and load this train with it. So you can have unique loadouts per outpost and it will still work, because only the train that belongs to this station has the ID of this train, and only then only if that ID fits this outpost will it send the loadout here. So we can make sure that the train that belongs to this outpost is loaded with the loadout that belongs to this outpost. Right, let's keep going. The train is being loaded. Right, and I have not yet given this the ready signal, so the train can't leave. Let's go back to normal speed. And let's give it the go signal. And this will stay active for the rest of the game, so the train is leaving. It is back at the outpost and will unload itself. And as it is unloading, you will see down here that the red light disappears at some point. This is your indication that you are at least with one item less than 10% of what you set up here. Right, so much like this side over here, this side also has its switches and a station unique internal loadout setting. So with this one, you can, because the station turns itself off, and it only turns back on once it recognizes that this train, this particular train, is in the depot. Let's actually see that happen. So I'm going to send this to the outpost load. Speed time up a little bit. the train is in the depot and it turns itself back on. It is only on the station during the time that the train over there requires to load and come back here. That is the only time that this station is active. So there is a very low chance, a possibility for the wrong train to end up in here, but that's no issue. I wanted to go back to normal. I've taken care of that in the sense that because it will still stop here, the train, and it will still recognize that it has successfully reached a maintenance unload station. The wrong train will still get unloaded, but it will only get unloaded with the items that the station wants. Then the train will go back to the depot and get itself stocked up again. And by that time, the correct train should already be back here and have turned the station off. So the wrong train that went back then goes back to its own station, because that's most likely to be the only one that's still active. By handling the trains in this way, on one side I make sure that the station is not, the wrong train driving in here is not completely wasted, because the station still gets the items it wants, right? And it doesn't bother the train, because afterwards the train goes back to outpost maintenance load anyway. And it still shouldn't happen often, because every station has its own train. So every time you build one of these outposts, you also build one of these trains. And usually the train just waits in here and does nothing, right? It just waits in here and waits until eventually at least one item is completely exhausted on the train, and it's all been unloaded into the station, and the station tries to unload another item, but it can't find it. And that's when this train will leave this outpost, go back to restock, and come back again. So, and because the station turns itself off, there are times when, especially at the start, when you start using this blueprint, you might find that you fucked something up and the station is now turned off when it shouldn't be. You can then go and use the switch to shock the station awake for one cycle. So this is just not a permanent thing. You simply use it once. The station, well, if the train wasn't in here, it is in here now, but you can basically use this to shock the station awake once, right? The station shouldn't have turned on until the train got to the depot and sent its ID over the global network to the station. But let's say something went wrong and the train is in the depot, but the station is still off, and now my train is now passing in the depot and can't find the station anymore because it's turned off. That's when I use this inserter to wake up the station so that the train knows where to come to. And over here, you can basically also for one tick tell the train to leave. So if the train is in here and for whatever reason you want it to go, you use this inserter to send it. The green lamp tells you that the entire circuitry down here is also set up in such a way that any train that comes in now is also told to leave. Although the trains have a inactivity timer in here, which is important for function, you can't remove this. It also ensures that any wrong train that drives in here at least leaves a couple items behind, right, for the station to have until the correct train comes back. And there are specific times when this turns off. Let's see. The train is here, right? The train is supposed to stay here because it has plenty of items, right? It's your mobile depot, you could say. It has plenty of items. It has no need of anything, and neither does the station. Therefore, the go signal is turned off. It will only turn back on if you either use this inserter, right? And again, this is just a one-tick pulse. You didn't toggle this on permanently. It will turn off as soon as the train comes back and the system decides that it no longer needs to send the train back home, right? This essentially tells you that it needs to send the train back home if it's shining, if the lamps are lit up. And over here, I haven't implemented this yet. I'm not entirely sure if I will, but if this switch is active, properly utilized, you would be using this to freeze the inserters, just like on the other side. I'm not sure if there's any real use for this. There shouldn't be, because the station is set up in such a way that it only unloads the items that you put in here, right? Okay, so final mentions for the how do you say, interface panel of the station. In here you can set your loadouts of the items that you want the station to unload from the train. If you have items in here loaded into the train but not in here, they will not be unloaded from the station. These are separate bars, and usually you just have to save in both, but you can use this to set individual numbers. So let's say you actually want more items in here than you want on the train. So for example, ammo, let's say 1000 ammo. I don't really like that. That's not enough. Let's actually have 4000 in here, right? But I also do not want the train to be loaded with 4000 ammo at the same time every time, because that's a lot of nuclear ammo, uranium ammo. Maybe I just started uranium. I don't have that many resources to support every outpost train being loaded with 4000 ammo. I can set this up in such a way that the station keeps unloading up to a threshold, right? And I can keep the number separate in this way. And the threshold is something I set over here in this combinator. I have two active signals here, right? The U is the fraction of what you have here that you want to unload. So right now, whatever I've set up here, 1/3 is being unloaded from the train. If I want this exact number that I have here to be actually unloaded from the train, I would put this to 1. Remember, this is not percentage, this is fraction, right? These are fractions. So if I enter 50 in here, I wouldn't be unloading 50%, I would be unloading 1/50 of what I've provided here. And over here is another fraction, which tells me at what fraction of this should you sound the alarm. If you hear the alarm of the station go off, you know that you have at least one item for some reason less than 1/10. And down here, this is the alarm that will go off. This lamp will light up with the alarm, right? If you mouse over this combinator, you can see on the right side of the screen which items those would be. This inserter is essentially just a screen, right? You can track up to 4 visible items, 5 if you click on the inserter, or all the items if you mouse over this combinator that's connected to the inserter. You can mouse over this and see all the items that you're missing. In this case, we want 2600 more uranium ammo, and the train will keep rolling until it has satisfied the station, right? This only lights up if the memory of the station has not yet been populated. Let's see that, right? Let's pretend I just built the station new. This lamp tells me that I need to move the train into the station to have it docked with the station for the ID to populate the system. I just broke the memory. I believe it was... crap. Yeah, I was on the right one. Okay. Let's fix the memory real quick. Here, this is the combinator. Once the train comes back in and parks at the station, this light will turn off, and that will tell me that it has successfully accepted a train. I have thought about creating a digit display, much like this over here, that would tell you the ID of the train, but as you just saw, those can be pretty long, so I would need a lot of digits here, and I figure if you actually need to know for some reason, you can always mouse over this, or you can use a mod like NixiTubes to read it out for you. The only time that's really interesting is basically when you want to make sure that you have separate trains. If you saw that the lamp turned off, we now have the train ID saved to the memory permanently. And if you want to actually read this out because you want to make sure that you don't have the wrong train or duplicate trains saved, like the same train saved to 2 stations basically, then you would need to devise a system where you could actually read the correct correct value, because obviously on the right side of the screen you only see 17,000K. You're not seeing the actual number. All right. The green lamp here tells me that the system would send off the train to get more items. Now, in this state, since the train isn't here, this doesn't actually tell me if it will continue to do so once the train is back. This is basically a leftover from the last time it sent the train away. And you can use this or these, basically the same thing, to tell whether the outpost sent its train away or if maybe you messed something up and the train left when it shouldn't have left or something like that. And this one over here, what is yellow again? I'm going to, oh yeah, right. If there's a train in the station, this lamp tells me whether or not it's the correct train, right? If this is yellow and there's a train in the station, I know that it doesn't match the ID of the memory, so it's not the train that should be in here. It's not a big issue because it will be forced to leave, right? When the wrong train is here, the go signal is always on, so the train will leave as soon as possible. But if it's a green signal, I know that we are okay. So I'm gonna add that in the actual blueprint later, a legend, because I keep forgetting what this one does. Right, I think that's it for this system. This is pretty complex, I'd say. I've tested it. I've run a test with 20 of these stations, freshly built in the same tick and turned on in the same tick, and all 20 trains of these going off into the main depot, looking to be refueled and going back to the stations, and I didn't have any issues. Right, it all worked out. So definitely the system works, even if it still has the slight vulnerability of the wrong train driving into the wrong station, because this one happened to turn on at the wrong time. Right, the only time a train goes in here, and it's not supposed to be in here, is basically if the train belonging to the station has arrived in the depot, thereby turning the station back on, and the train that was going to go to its own station on the way somewhere got stopped at a rail chain signal and had to wait for traffic, right? And ended up repathing after a couple seconds of not doing anything. And even then, it will only drive into the wrong station if that station is closer than its destination station. So basically, it is possible, it can happen. If it does happen, it isn't a big issue. It doesn't freeze the system or anything. But even so, it shouldn't happen much, right? Because the trains are mostly in the stations and the stations are mostly turned off, so they're not accessible to the wrong trains anyway. But if you see it, don't panic. There's nothing wrong with it, really. And I believe that is it for the outposts. Remember that if you use the outposts, you have to have put at some point one of these global memories somewhere. So you can, usually I put them in the depot. I've said this multiple times now in other videos already. I just keep iterating on it because it's important not to forget that if for whatever reason you can't seem to make this go signal stick, or can't seem to get trains to come to you more than one at a time, it's because you forgot to put this module somewhere in the global network, and you can put it really anywhere. There's a big power pole with connection to the global network, so you could put it here, you could have put it all the way up here, or wherever you basically find some space, right? Wherever you want. I usually put it in the depot. And as I've explained earlier, you only ever want one of these. As soon as you have multiple of these in the same global network, they start corrupting each other, and it breaks the system. That's why it is not by default part of the depot blueprints, right? It is by default its own blueprint, which is kind of annoying because you have to remember to put this in the system. But that's how it has to be, because you can have multiple depots, right? Most people will only ever have one, because that means that every time you have a depot, you need to figure out a way to deliver materials to it. And usually you just have the depot next to a mall. But you can have, if you have a particularly large map and your trains are taking multiple minutes to drive back home or something, you can have more depots if you want, so that trains will always go to the closest one. And in that case, having this part as part of the original blueprint would cause it to break, and that's why I isolated it. And that is important to remember when you use these outposts, because you can't really effectively use the trains if you don't use that module. All right, I think I've talked enough now. Oh, no. I almost forgot these. And I forgot the dummy station. So what are these called? These are called Outpost Maintenance Unload. And if you realize that is the exact same name you have in here. Now, the only time these guys activate is when all the stations, all the Outpost Maintenance Unload stations are turned off. That should normally not be an issue, because that means all the trains are inside their stations, hence they're not going to be in the way. But if you mess up something somewhere, or something interrupts the system and a train is not back in its station, but the station is turned off, then you have these dummy stations for the train to go to. They won't be blocking your traffic. They won't be stuck somewhere, no passing on the rails. They'll have somewhere to go back to, right? And the same is true for the builder train as well. So if all your outpost setup stations are currently disabled, it is possible sometimes that this happens while you have a train on the way. So that train would then stop in place and would no path until you enabled a new supply station somewhere, right? A new outpost build station, setup station is what I was looking for. In that case, this dummy station enables itself. It is only enabled when all outpost setup stations are disabled, right? Then this dummy station turns itself on, thereby leading the train back to the depot, and the train will go back through the station, consider this completed, drive into the depot and get itself recycled and restocked. And it will actually keep driving circles as long as you still have check marks in the system. Usually that doesn't happen because you always call for a specific amount of trains, like, okay, I probably need 4 landfill trains here to fill this lake, or I probably want to build this blueprint 5 times, so I need 5 trains delivering the materials for one, right? So the only time a train drives in circles here is if something went wrong, and at least it's not clogging up your traffic, right? They don't know path in the middle of nowhere. I've made sure of that. Much like the depots, you also have small pack stations here that you can enter with 1-2 trains. If you don't want to use the building train for something and you're just stuck in the middle of nowhere, you need to get someplace really quick, you can use these pack stations. All right. That's it for the depots. Thank you for watching. This video was a little bit longer, but I guess there was more to cover this time. Hope you have a lot of fun with the system. I will be making an actual how to use video that shows you how to build a rail network with all of these blueprints and goes through the process of setting everything up. And that's also when I will be explaining these finishes to you. They are very important for the functioning of the many-to-many stations. Thanks for watching. Bye.